Well, good morning. This is Dennis, and it's a January the 17th. We're on top of Mount Shasta. You'll be able to hear the wind blowing and coat sleeves ruffling and different things of that nature because the quality of the sound is uniquely influenced by the beauty of nature. You can hear the snow almost sometimes up here when it falls. It's such a gentle, appeasing feeling. And because I like the area and the essence so much, I'm doing this 1989, Stepping into the Consciousness, Part 2, up here. The way the tapes are done is that sometimes they are lists of material. Sometimes I do inspirational things. Sometimes it deals with feeling. But most of all, it's an hour of me talking with you, expressing the things that have gone on within the last month that appear to have, or appear to play a part within our growth. I teach in my own inevitable style, of course, and it somewhat follows the lines of easiness, lightening up, almost as if I was just sitting there in your living room talking with you. I find that by sharing my own personal experiences that sometimes this helps give you a reference point as to just the regular, average, everyday look-see, instead of this profound material that constantly comes across and fills your mind with a bunch of facts, but sometimes isn't that sit in a rocking chair kind of feeling that we need. I follow somewhat of a pattern like Jesus, in so much as I use, not parables, I wouldn't know what you would call them, but little short stories where I will compare something that happened in the day so that as a personality you can see how that is applicable to you in your everyday living. I enjoy being up here and teaching from up here because usually I'll be able to get in, say, 1, maybe 2 hours of meditation before I actually do the tape, which to me gives me that feeling of a lightness, a clarity. Oh, good morning there, Mr. Bird. And as you can tell, we get a little morning nature in there with us. There are a few birds, regardless of the temperature, who do visit me. This one squawking, if you can hear it in the distance, is one that usually hangs out. It's nice to share the song of a bird also, along with all of the other things that go on up here. The song of the wind is also pleasant, and like I said, you can almost hear the snowflakes. And every now and then a little cry of a bird, and perhaps you'll even get to feel or see some very unusual colors skate across the mountaintop while you sit here. And so all in all, I feel that the tape is majorly inspirational. Once again, it doesn't follow any particular pattern of teaching because I'm not any particular teacher. And I just sort of start as it goes and how I feel in the moment. I've had great success with the tapes, and so without further ado, I think we'll just sort of get into it. Kind of sit yourself back and relax. This is going to be pretty much of a peaceful tape because I feel peaceful, and I can only reflect to you in the moment what is going on. Subject material is picked as I feel it from time to time. I do not make the tapes 12 at a time so that I just send you a different one each month. I make them as I'm up here, in the moment, because I like to express with you the things that we're all feeling together. What is going on in the day? What is it that appears to be working on us in a form of energy so that we can support it or limit it or cut it off, depending on if it is growing us or perhaps not growing us. You will find that I'm in a non-judgmental state. I don't try to put qualifications on the things I teach. In other words, when I'm up here talking, I'm talking in a way of, and you can believe it, and you don't have to believe it. If it works for you, use it. If it doesn't work for you, just kind of hang around. It may work for you a little later on. Whatever it is, it'll be pleasant and easy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an individual who is dealing with self-transformation, not only for me, but for all of us on the planet. I believe that anything that I can do, naturally anybody else can do, and I believe that we have all of these qualifications within inside of us. The reason that you're buying this tape series is because you've heard of things that I've done, or you've heard of things that I've said, or you feel a warmth inside of you about the teachings. But basically, I teach one thing. There is a God, and you are part of it. And that everything that I share with you is specifically designed to awaken that spirit or that God part up inside of you, so that you can say, wow, I can feel this, I can sense this. You see, there are so many parts of us that not all of the parts are subject to our five senses. And we have these other bodies, these feeling bodies, these intuitive bodies, these knowing bodies. And I feel that as I talk, I would like to enhance those bodies that are within you, so that you begin to realize that you are so much more than just a physical eardrum listening to what I say. I add humor because I believe it is that lightness which accelerates us, which grows us. I think that we have enough pressures of the day putting downward force on us, so that we should be able to look at that spirit and kind of let go of those heavy pressures and just sort of feel the lightness that we are, the joy that we are, the happiness that we are. In this everyday hustle and bustle, sometimes we forget that we are more, and we get wrapped up into the physical structures. In this tape series, I want to start off with 3 unique tapes. In the beginning of this way. And this first subject material that I would like to talk about, and I've talked enough about myself. If you're buying this tape, you must know something about me. Just to give you a little more, naturally, I'm sure that you've heard that in 1983 I altered salmonella bacteria with the mind to basically demonstrate that the human body is capable of altering anything that it would like. And if the human body and the human mind can do this, then what else can we really do? What are the limits that we are capable of reaching out to? Not our limits, but what is the limitlessness that we are capable of reaching out to? And what are the limits that we are capable of letting go of? I'd like to start this tape off, and I know I've said this a few times, but because it's the first tape, I want to make sure that everybody listening out there is sort of relaxing into their chair and getting somewhat of a subtle idea of what's going to take place. Play these tapes often. They're very informative and they're filled with pearls of wisdom. I know that to be true because I put them in there. The other avenue is to sometimes read between the lines. There are feelings that go between the lines. Relax and enjoy. And I feel that as we grow, we will be able to experience this. This year, prosperity. This year, growth will be the key expression for us. I believe that our prosperity is going to grow in several ways. Now, when you hear the word prosperity, a lot of us feel that there is a reference to money. But prosperity is actually so much more than just money. It's our enlightenment. It is our way that we see the world. It is the way that we feel this world. And it is the way that we intuit this world. You see, in order to have the prosperity just on the physical plane, we must also have the prosperity in the emotional plane, and in the mental plane, and in the intuitive plane, and in the feeling plane, because these are all avenues of ourselves that we have a tendency to overlook, because we are basically looking at, and can the bill be paid today on the due date? Is there a nice meal on the table for supper? And so in terms of prosperity, this is what we look at. And sometimes our essence may overlook the prosperity of going through the day and having that joyous little smile cross the corner of our lips as we see another human being express a state of joy or express a state of lovingness or show a little kindness to the other human beings that we share this planet with. I was sitting in McDonald's. I laugh because those of you who don't know me, McDonald's to me is somewhat like a treat. I only go to a fast food restaurant probably once or twice a month if I'm on the road and I'm just kind of hungry and I don't want to actually stop. And then McDonald's is sort of like eating at the Ritz to me. Now, I know that sounds silly, but I don't ever frequent fast food stands. So I'm sitting in the McDonald's and I'm totally enjoying my little meal, and I think the French fries are superb. And so I was loading up on carbos, and there was a piece of paper, and some people had left a bag of trash sitting out there. And I was going to watch the bag of trash because I was going to pick it up as I left, and I just kind of watched it to watch people as they saw this bag of trash. And sure enough, a car pulled up, and this gentleman and his wife, and you could tell they were a loving couple, and they have been there. And he looked at his wife with a little smile, and now I'm saying a loving couple, they must have been in their late 60s, maybe early 70s. And he walked right over there and he picked it up. And he felt good because you could see him glow. He felt good about picking up trash just to make his home, which is this planet, look a little cleaner. And there was a smile on my lips. And I noticed that, yes, the senses of seeing definitely observed it, but there was a sense of feeling. I noticed that as he lifted, a smile came over my face, and it was like, wow, the man cared about the planet he lived on. And there was a little joy that kind of rushed through my body. And I knew that joy came from nothing more than experiencing another human being feeling good about what they were doing, feeling good, feeling prosperous. You see, they felt that they had done something and received something. I had felt the same way. I had felt I received the gift of the joy of an individual doing his part and feeling good about it, not but actually, and not blaming anybody. Boy, look at these people doing it. He just picked it up out of pure joy, smiled at his wife, she kind of smiled back, and there was that prosperousness of feeling. That prosperousness of knowing that within your heart, a little burst of joy just kind of like went boop. And I noticed that prosperous feeling inside of me didn't have anything to do with money or anything like that. It was just a feeling that, wow, what a far out thing. And as I felt that, I could feel that glow that was so nice and so loving that it just sort of rolled around the planet. Do you know what I mean? You are the world. You are a creator. You are the universe. And as you put that joy out, that prosperous feeling of joy, it goes around the planet. And then my mind kind of didn't really think, but it had that intuitive of, wow, that was really nice. What a loving thing that gentleman did. And I acknowledged it. I spoke out and said, thank you. And the gentleman knew in his heart that I said, thank you for picking it up, and it was a clean act. And then he felt expanded, and he became prosperous in the feeling of not only did he do it for the planet, but the planet noticed back. In retrospect, his wife and me. He did it without wanting something in return. And I think that prosperousness is being an avenue of God, where in turn you don't respect or you don't expect anything back. You just did it because you were in the joy of it. You were prosperous in the knowing that this is something that should be done, that this is something that is rewarded out of knowing. And as all of this went on, I began to notice that prosperity wasn't something outside of me. I was prosperous. I am prosperity. And that I can receive prosperity in more ways than just financial. Joy to my heart. Joy to my mind. I am becoming prosperous. I am receiving things that go beyond the physical plane. And as all that went on, I also began to realize my divinity within that gentleman and wife as they did their thing. And I began to feel more of part of the universe than ever before. And I began to feel the joy. And I began to feel the godlike avenues of it. And so there was just a little simple prosperous thing that grew me. Along in these avenues, I'm going to cover a lot of things because it's an intro tape. Along with these avenues, I noticed that along with that prosperousness came abundance. I received a smile that may not have been there. And so I realized that a gift was given to me. I also realized that somewhere along the line I created that gift to be given to me by doing that very same caring act somewhere else. The joy of experiencing was quite nice, and I realized that as the day went by, I abundantly received several of those things. I noticed that by driving down the road, there was more courtesy in the drivers. And I began to realize that our abundance and our prosperity comes from the fact of how much we are willing to love ourselves, how much we are willing to observe things. I also observed individuals who watched this gentleman, and it was like, boy, look at that stupid guy picking it up. Jeez, boy, I don't know. And I noticed that not everybody received the same act in the same way. That all of us have personalities, have and can receive prosperity and abundance in the way that we wish. The individuals that saw him as a dumb individual placing something in a trash can, they saw him from a perspective of a person who was just sort of being used by the planet. In other words, yeah, go pick the trash up, buddy. That's all you really deserve. That's how dumb. And yet, that individual also was receiving prosperity by watching the gentleman pick it up. He was prospering himself from a negative viewpoint of perceiving the gentleman as a dumb sort of individual. But yet he was still gaining, he was still prospering, he was still learning, because he evaluated through his own ideas and his own concepts of the stupidity of the gentleman. And I noticed that neither my act of the joy of seeing it, nor the other gentleman's act of the seeing the old man as dumb, I noticed that our prosperousness was equal in reception. I noticed that the gentleman chose to receive wow, what a stupid thing he's doing. He received that reflection to himself. So he was prospering himself with the reflection. How dumb could he be? I, on the other hand, was receiving the very same prosperity by saying, wow, what a kindly and loving thing to do. And I observed in this perfect world that both of us who observed the gentleman were receiving what we needed and what we were putting out. And I guess sometimes we get a retrospect and we get to see what it is that we are putting out. Are we putting out criticism, or are we putting out joy? I observed the criticism that the gentleman put out, and I noticed that he really didn't really mean to criticize. He actually just had a concept that anybody who does anything for somebody else was dumb. And I observed the gentleman's thoughts in that way and realized that he was receiving back from the universe a really beautiful thing, and that he could that's not quite the word, that he could understand it in whatever way that he wanted, and his choice was to see it in that way. I also noticed that it was an automatic understanding. In other words, he uses that thought a lot. Boy, that was dumb. Boy, that was dumb. Boy, that was dumb. Boy, that was done. And that what he was getting back to himself through his feeling body was, boy, am I dumb. Boy, am I dumb. Boy, am I dumb. Because I began to realize that you only get back what you put out, and that the world will reflect to you only as you are willing to receive it and see it. If your reflection is stupidity, that man is stupid, then that is what you will get back to yourself, because that is what you are learning about yourself. If you choose to feel and see the joy, then that is what you are choosing to learn and see within yourself. And that both acts, whether one is positive and one is negative, is really prosperousness. The universe gives you that prosperousness in any way, shape, and form you choose to see it. And so there is perfection in all things that happen to be going on out there. And I realize that the perfection we see is totally up to us. And if it's totally up to us, it is totally up to us to try and evaluate, or to try and grow in such a way that we see the joys in the world and feel the joys, so that I think our world slowly begins to express more of a joyousness to us. I noticed that as I looked at the individual who was seeing stupidity within the act, there was joy within his act of ridiculing the individual. And I also saw the growth, but it wasn't necessarily supportive. And yet the growth was there, no more, no less, in the perfection of the universe. We get to pick and choose everything that goes on out there, and we get to acknowledge it as it reflects itself back to us. We must remember that we have created all of the things that are out there. Now, this is one of the things that kind of perplexes a lot of us. If we are really creating our world out there, how come our world doesn't really give back to us what we want? Well, it gives back to us what we see through the eyes that we see it with. If my eyes are seeing it as a beautiful, joyous thing, then that's what I will see. If my eyes are seeing it as a stupid thing, then that's what I will see it as. Regardless how I see it, I can pretty well evaluate that that's how I'm feeling within myself, or that that's what I am creating for myself to see. And as such, I need to take a look at myself and say to myself, well, do I want to see the world in joy, or do I want to see the world in stupidity? Either way, I'm going to get to see it. But I think that as we look at the world, it is much easier to see it with joy than it is to see it with resentment and criticism. Both grow us. But I find that there is more excitement in my heart when I see things in a loving way rather than if I see things in a resentful way. I see that if I see things in resentful ways, it actually pulls me down onto more of a physical plane. Perfect as it is, but I begin to notice that the physical plane really starts to pull me down. It brings me into a denser feeling. And I begin to notice that people around me start to criticize and do criticizing things so that I may see what it is that I need to grow through. As I receive the criticism, I find that I rather receive the joy and the smile. And so what I've learned to do is pay attention in every given moment. Every single moment that there is, I pay attention. I also know that a being of free will, I can see the act as a state of criticism, or I can see the act as a state of joy. And I realize that my free will has the choice to do this. I've also known that my emotional body will give me somewhat of a feeling. You know what it's like when you criticize somebody. You can really get into criticism and you can really tear somebody apart. Also, when you begin to feel joy and love, you can really begin to feel joy and love, and there's a major different experience there with these sorts of things. We create around us a mirror image of who we are and where we are at all times. Do we want to be an individual that is criticizing ourselves constantly, or do we want to be an individual who is sharing the love constantly? Actually, to tell you the truth, both ways we're prospering ourselves, but in one way we're prospering the lack of harmony due to criticism, because we will find that there isn't as much joy and excitement when people criticize us as there is when people praise us. I think criticism is something that all of us are working on, and I think it's something that we can easily use in our life and not necessarily even know that we're doing it. Sometimes criticism is very slick and very subtle, and it belittles other people, and as we belittle other people, it makes us feel better about ourselves for some reason. And yet, as we criticize that other person, we are actually criticizing ourselves. Criticism is something I think that we all deal with in a very subtle way, and that if we were to pay more attention to it, we would be able to help our divine side or our spiritual body, or at least if we pay attention to it, we would find that less criticism is being reflected back to us. See, what happens is sometimes we give out this criticism, and naturally it's really just us criticizing ourselves. And so we feel that the world is criticizing us, so we want to get a couple zingers back in there. So we criticize some other people, feel a little good about ourselves then, because, well, at least I'm not taking all of it. I just kind of blew the blunt onto that person. And yet, criticism is something that we need to let go. It is a concept. It is an idea that we are not worthy to be us. And because we have that fear that we're not getting enough strokes, we will criticize others so that we can get the laughter of ridiculing somebody. Subtly, of course. None of us do it belligerently, just subtly. I notice that this tape's coming to an end, so we'll shoot over to the other side. I'll see you there.